Hello, guys. Good morning, good evening to everyone. We'd like to welcome you to this new initiative. It's the Rio and Leeds Bridge Seminars, Building Research Interest Across Developed and Growing Economies. Tribute to the UK, this acronym. And these seminars were created to increase and foster the connection between Institute of Economics at UFRJ and Leeds Business School. We always share a pluralistic view of economics. Since I knew Leeds, I knew Leeds as a center of reference of heterodox economies, of heterodox research, and also to a very pluralistic view of the subject. And we hope these seminars will bring opportunities for us to meet our peers at Leeds, at Rio. Probably we'll have other opportunities to meet in person and on this conference, on other seminars and so on. But we hope that this is a first step so we can be together and discussing and researching and doing a lot of stuff from now on. This first session is in the 19th of May, but we will have always the sessions on the first Friday of every month. We'll have a program for the whole year from now to November, and we will always use this visual platform. We are talking about perhaps 1 or 2 sessions. We'll have people from Leeds here at July and August in Rio. Probably I'll have the opportunity to be at Leeds in September, and perhaps we'll have some in-place sessions, but with this virtual platform also working together. And each session will feature one question that the guest discussers will approach. Today, it's a very insightful question. So does the rise of China pose a threat to the hegemony of the US dollar? And we have the 2 discussants, Professor Ernani Torres, which is vinculated to the graduate program International Political Economy here at the Institute of Economics, UFRJ, and Professor Gary Dymski from LUBS at the other side of the table. And I don't know, Bianca, you wanna talk about the short bios of our guests, and then we can start perhaps.
Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for joining us today. I think, like Norberto said, this is an initiative to kind of, foster the collaboration between the University of Leeds and the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. So Bob and I have been collaborating for quite a while now, teaching at both universities, both in Leeds and in Rio. And this is, I would say, it's a kind of like a spillover, an outcome of the work that we already started together. Some of you already know Gabriel, who came to Leeds to do his part of his PhD there with Gary and Anina and myself. So essentially that's the idea. So I guess some of the guests here today are postgraduate researchers both in Leeds and in Brazil. So just to let you know that there is this initiative to foster the collaboration between these 2 universities. So if you have the interest of, spending some time either in Leeds or in Rio, there's always the opportunity there. So just to describe a little bit the profile of both professors presenting today. So Gary Dymski is the Director of Strategy of IPERN, which is a project that he's developing with other professors at the University of Leeds. And he has been a professor of applied economics at the Leeds University Business School since 2012, after 22 years of the economics faculty of the University of California in Riverside. So he has more than 200 academic publications and has been a visiting scholar at universities in 8 different countries. So that's quite a lot, quite impressive. And since coming to the UK, he has been involved in 2 national research initiatives. He led the institution's research hub for the ESRC Rebuilding Macroeconomics project from 2017 to 2020. And he was a co-investigator for the ESRC Productivity Insights Network project between 2018 and 2021. Gary was also a member of the 2018-2020 project for the UK Women's Budget Group, the Commission on a Gender Equal Economy. And he has served on the Intergovernmental Experts Panel of the Debt and Development Division of the United Nations Conference on Trade Development since 2017. Since the spring of 2020, he has been active in efforts to stimulate economic renewal, inclusive growth and sustainability in the Yorkshire region where LUBS is. And these efforts focus on how the university-based research and engage can help local and regional governments, business, and the community members to develop a vibrant region.
Next time we'll have a delay, it's great to have a short bio of Gary.
Gives us some time. Yeah. Yeah. And Ernani Torres, who is a professor at the Institute of Economics and the permanent professor at the graduate program in the International Political Economy at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, where Norberto and I and Gabriel, where we graduated, and Norberto is a professor now, Gabriel finishing his PhD there. So Ernani has served as a consultant and researcher for several institutions, including the British Foreign Office. So for those of you interested in currency internationalization and all that, there is a very interesting report that he worked also with Norberto, and the Brazilian Central Bank, as well as the Brazilian Securities and Exchange Commission. So he was a career economist at the Brazilian Development Bank, which we call the BNDES, and superintendent of export and economic research area. So I guess this is rather very long introduction of both speakers today.
Yeah, have a great team to start. And just before give the floor to Gary, I'd like just to highlight the role of Gabriel in this setup. I think these seminars were designed, were conceived by him, so we need to give the proper acknowledgement to his efforts to bring this together and to put everything in motion. So, Gary, please, can you give us thoughts about how the rise of China does the rise of China pose a threat to the hegemony of the US dollar or not?
All right. So let me jump into the question and begin by just saying, giving a shout out to Luis Fernando, a very longtime friend, and good to see you here, Luis. And let me, we decided that we would make this a conversation for those of you who are online. And so we're not going to use slides. And we thought we would take about 15 minutes each giving our own answers to these questions, and then going from there. So actually, this question, does the rise of China pose a threat to US dollar hegemony? So I'm going to open up some themes. And basically...
I think Ernani got in, sorry. Ernani,
are you
there? No.
Roberto, sorry for the delay.
Okay, just in time.
Good.
Okay, great.
Gary already started, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Gary.
My pleasure, because it's we want to have this as conversation. So your timing is perfect, Ernani. And so settle in and we'll talk. So actually this question, does the rise of China pose a threat to US dollar hegemony? I'm going to give a contradictory answer because it just, in a sense, that the question itself is contradictory. So my answer would be yes, but actually I'm going to break this question into 3 sub-questions, and my answer to each of those is no. So let me go through. I've been thinking about this, and here's what I got. So the first sub-question buried in this question is China's rise positioning this nation, China, to be a world hegemonic nation, including its currency, the yuan or the renminbi? And my answer would be no, actually, because China's economic rise is really focused on meeting the demands for prosperity of its jumbo-sized population in the context of a state-led, regionally based planning model, and securing the resource inputs that its market-freeing modernization drive demands. So seeking to control the yuan, and its financial sector and the banks and all of that, as well as controlling its population's investment options, is absolutely crucial if China is to avoid avoid falling prey to the contradictions implicit in its strategy. So that means that the renminbi cannot become the new world currency replacing the US dollar. And China's big 4 banks, although they are arguably the largest in the world, they cannot become the successors to the too big to fail, market innovating, unregulatable global mega banks that are whose home is the United States, and banks like Chase, Citi, and Goldman. Now, the second sub-question that I find in this meta question is, will the US's current leadership of international economic policy, whose most concrete manifestation is the exorbitant privilege of the US dollar, will this be undercut itself by China's economic rise? And once again, my answer is no. First of all, because the US is not actually hegemonic over the international economy. It isn't playing the role that, say, Charles Kindleberger described of a hegemon. That is, that a hegemon should make globe-spanning rules that maintain open markets and provide a fair framework for everyone to compete on an even basis. No, actually, the US is a post-hegemonic hegemon. It looks after its own interests. Secondly, the second reason that I say no about whether the US's current leadership will be undercut by China's economic rise is that actually the US dollar's exorbitant privilege is linked to the structural contradictions at the heart of the US's international economic position. Its 40-year-long deficit on current account, and as a consequence, the elephantine expansion of its financial sector to global scale, which has led to increasingly severe, uncontrollable financial crises that have required or led to the designation of a set of mega banks as too big to fail. In other words, the US's own contradictory global economic role is what will ultimately undermine the US dollar. It won't be linked to China as such. And then the third question I find in here is, will the expanding geopolitical and geoeconomic footprint of China and the contraction of the US's geopolitical and geoeconomic footprint, will this lead to a hot war, a cold war, or global decoupling? Is this the kind of threats? Well, a hot war, for example, over Taiwan, or maybe the proxy conflict in Ukraine, let's hope not. Will it lead to a new Cold War? Actually, arguably, it already has. We have, in a sense, if we think of Cold War #1, that is to say, where the United States and with NATO were facing off against the USSR, with China playing a proxy role very directly on Russia's side. You had first the Korean War, the conflict in 1950s, and then you had China support in the 60s, well, 50s and 60s, for North Vietnam. The result of those two conflicts within the context of the Cold War #1 was, of course, the demilitarized zone of Korea, the division of that nation, and then on the north side, you had the entitled and protected regime of the Kim dynasty, and on the south side, you had that sort of ally of the United States, for better or for worse. The second conflict, the Vietnamese conflict, of course, did lead to the liberation of Vietnam from French and then US dominance, with Europe and NATO playing a proxy role on the US side. Now, that was Cold War #1. Cold War #2, we have the US and NATO versus China, with Russia now being in the proxy role with China, arguably. Now, is the Ukraine war something like the new Korean War? That is, will it lead to a permanent stalemate? Or will it be something like a new war in Vietnam, leading to the liberation of Ukraine from foreign control or occupation? Well, how about that? We don't know. And just to say that another war we could think of would be, how about the US-China trade war and global decoupling? We'll come to that momentarily. I've used about half my time, and what I'll do is just go through and make a few points about the sort of different aspects of this. I want to hit on a couple aspects of China. One reason that we see China rising is arguably that, first we see its modification of a paradigm of growth that was called the flying geese paradigm for Japan back in the 1980s, 70s, and 80s. And this has been modified by China to a new form, but it leads to a very interesting, structural situation of China in the global economy. And the second reason is the second thing to mention about China is the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, just to say a couple of things, what we have with the flying geese paradigm is that, Japan adopted this notion of basically expanding, of course, its production. It went into World War II with a relatively advanced approach, technology and economy. And then, of course, that economy was badly hurt in World War II. And as it came out of that war, what we saw was Japan, as it got into the redevelopment and expansion of its influence in East Asia, basically they used a flying geese approach. What that had to do was with basically as the Japan was succeeding, there was a sense that the Japanese competition was unfair to the United States in particular, and to Europe to a lesser extent, because it was outcompeting these nations in their manufacturing core areas, automobiles, electronics, and so on. The notion was that, what's happening as the yen rises in value, we had the kind of situation where the Japanese products could be priced out of the market. So there was the adoption of a kind of technology transfer within East Asia. As you see, the idea was that the lead goose is Japan, and then its leadership is passed down to Korea, Taiwan, other nations, down to Thailand, et cetera. And basically, the production facilities are offloaded, offshored to lower cost nations. Well, that worked. Now, there's a story there that we'll leave and maybe discuss later about why Japan didn't succeed. But in a certain way, what we see with China is a similar situation where they too have their relationships inside Asia. There's a lot of nations that are linked into the overall Chinese production complex. What's maybe different and worth noting about the Chinese case is that basically it's more of an integrated production consumption complex. So it's very comprehensive, to the point that almost about half of the global trade actually happens within East Asia. So there's this kind of separate zone that's emerging as a zone of independent economic prosperity, if you will. Now, the kind of flaw for China is the Belt and Road Initiative. well, not a flaw, a feature, has been the idea of moving into Eurasia and expanding the footprint of China across that vast space, basically because there's a need for new markets, but especially for resources. And so this has been something that's been an initiative. However, this has come into problems in recent years. It's an initiative pretty much of the current leadership, Xi Jinping. And basically because the Belt and Road Initiative, which is that expansion of China beyond its global borders, has been funded through local currencies, not the renminbi. And actually it's led to some of the participating countries getting into debt difficulties. And basically China has not been playing a positive role in terms of resolving some of the resulting debt crises. It's not used to it. There's some reluctance to step in and do the sorts of things that are needed to resolve these things, that at this point, all of the apparatus is set up through the international financial institutions, IMF and so on. And basically it's kind of stuck. So we're seeing some contradictions really emerge. China needs those connections. In fact, if we look at China's situation, we see that they really do need to trade in order to support their overall economic growth. But how to do that well, problematic. Now, I'll just say a couple of things because I've written a lot over the years about the fragilities of the US situation. I just want to say a couple of things. First of all, the dollar itself is not hegemonic in a certain way. The dollar is as it is because it's, first of all, a safe haven asset. In a world with a shortage of safe assets, we see the dollar as a place where people can run. And the US itself is also not really anymore a hegemon, as mentioned. We no longer see the United States supporting and giving strength to multilateral organizations. The biggest example here would be the fact that the World Trade Organization is hung up on the Doha round, has been for over almost 20 years. And actually, at the present moment, the United States has been crippling the World Trade Organization's crisis management mechanisms. So there's, that's a problem there. And then the second thing to say is that the global mega banks of the United States are also problematic. And they're problematic on their own turf in the parts of the world that actually have almost little or nothing to do with China. Their dominance linked to the current account deficit of the US, flooding the world with dollars, undercutting US industry, widening inequality at home and abroad, increasing the need for fiscal support for those who are living in the context of the erosion of the living standards of the US working class. This, what Wolfgang Streeck has called buying time. It means that, we have a lot of frustrated people in the United States who are deeper in debt and turning against outsiders. That position, as shown with the once presidency and perhaps future presidency of Donald Trump, is dripping with contradictions. And of course, the other thing I would like to just finish by saying is that the Federal Reserve itself, which has had to operate as an international lender of last resort in this historical period since the beginning of, let's call it neoliberalism, about 1980 and on through the period of deregulation, the only way that the neoliberal era has persisted is with the Federal Reserve playing an increasingly important role as an international lender of last resort. The thing is that basically it's been called on increasingly to play this role, especially in the post-crisis adoption of macro policies in the global north. And basically at the same time, because the preservation of the globalized financial system that was necessary in the wake of the great financial crisis, because that was a kind of incomplete restoration, the Fed has essentially had to position itself at the bottom of global liquidity markets and has never really been able to fully separate. And so you have a wounded, but still aggressive and speculation-prone global financial system that is being held up by the great efforts of the U.S. Federal Reserve. And so basically, there's this weakening of the U.S.'s, sort of capacity on its own, so that this has not yet crippled the dollar, but the danger signs are very much there. I think I'm going to leave it here. I might say something about decoupling, but let's save that for the discussion because I'm at my time at 15 minutes. Thanks, and let's hear what Ernani has to say.
You're on mute, Ernani. Ernani, you're still on mute.
Perfect. Okay. Well, sorry for the delay, but this happened. I'm very pleased to take part in this first seminar, and Rio and Leeds, or Leeds Rio. I don't know which way. We have to discuss it later. But as I have 15 minutes, I'll try to make 3 points on our subject. Is the yuan a threat to the dollar hegemony? I do agree with Gary that I don't think the yuan has conditions to be a threat to the dollar, and I don't think the Chinese want that as well. But I might reach these conclusions from a different perspective, and I'd like to make 2 points in this 15 minutes. I think there is a lot of confusion. When I read Financial Times and some academic literature, I sometimes find that there is a very naive, let's say, understanding of what is an international currency. Usually what you find is something like that. They think the international market, the international money market is based on competition between national currencies. They offer services to governments, to corporations, and they compete. And the best, the most efficient one wins and gets all. Yes, because there is a net. This is based on an idea that money is what money does. And from that point of view, the dollar is hegemonic because it offers the best service in town. Okay, from that point of view, of course, the Chinese cannot provide the same services today as the Americans do. But on the other hand, there are some, this idea brings some idea of threats in coming from the weaponization of the dollar. Whenever the sanctions, financial sanctions are imposed on Russia, Iran, and things like that, this is something that decreases the acceptability of the dollar to, and the other thing also is let's say, well, there is sometimes crisis and problems in the American market and things like that. This is the idea behind that. That's the money is what money does. Functions are very important, and demand is central to keep hegemonic currency in hand. So the United States should fear what's going on, and this is. I find that in Financial Times a lot of people thinking on that. I think when you look to history and think that money is not a creature of the market, but a creature of the states, I think there is a enormous literature on that. And if it's a creature of the state, it is a way for the states to accumulate power or to provide more means to enhance its capability domestically and overseas. From that perspective, as we bring history, there was no such thing as like, change of words between the pound of the old lion to the ego dollar. When I look to what happened in the Bretton Woods, the United States imposed its currency to everybody else, and they treated badly, from my point of view, the old empire. The pound was not even mentioned as an international currency. Keynes tried to complain about that, but Morgenthau just said, that's what I read. Okay, so and it's very interesting because what is behind that? It's if you have the hegemonic currency, if you issue the hegemonic currency, you won't have, your country won't have any problem of financial to finance its current accounts. Okay, so there's no constraint of settlement risk or things like that with the dollar, and that is very important because it insulates politically the US from any pressure. What happened a lot with Britain in the past? The idea that okay, I'll give you some limitations to my power, and I'll fix a parity between the dollar and gold. That was written down in Bretton Woods. But when the restriction came to life, the US just said, "Oh, sorry, the dollar is our currency, but it's your problem." Okay, so the international monetary system is the dollar. It's the American system. We operate through the American banks, the American dollars, the American financial, and of course, the United States has to take precautions to keep the functionability. It has to function. It has to operate payments. It has to operate assets. But as a matter of fact, I don't think the international currency. I think we should look to international currency as a mean of power for the countries that issues that. And it's not. The dollar is not the hegemonic currency because it offers better service. By the way, it offers better service. It's very functional in a lot of ways, but it is a deliberate imposition of the US after it was the victorious country after the Second World War. That said, I think we could move a little bit on also the idea of hegemony. Usually, hegemony had the idea of Charles, as Perry said, Charles, call him Charles Kinderberger, but the idea of hegemonic stability theory. So we need a hegemon and to enforce the rules, to make everybody behave, and that's what happens in the international market. In a certain way, I do agree with that, but I think we had to add some spices on that. I think the hegemon doesn't do that because it is benevolent. It does it because it is a source of power, and particularly the rules that its enforcement is their rules. It's their rules that benefit the hegemon. I'm bringing here the idea of structural power, of Susan Strange, and things like that. So the hegemon has the role to keep to provide stability, but also it will, and the US has done that many times. It will change the rules whenever the rules are not inefficient in terms of its power perspective. What I have in mind, like 1971, well, the dollar is as good as gold, but tomorrow it's not going to be as good as gold, and the world has to adjust itself because we decided against. And that changed completely the financial markets, the way the rules, and I don't want to take longer, we can discuss that much. But the financial system before 1971 and after, they are completely different. And the idea that the market has done that, had pressed the US to change it, is a fairy tale. No? The Volcker group, which was adding Nixon, there is a wonderful work on that. There is a report that says that we should not, let's live with, no restriction after 1968. We want adjusted to the American economy. We're not going to stop the war in Vietnam. We are going to keep moving, and the world will have to adjust. And at the right time, when the markets are on an unstable situation, we will move out of gold, but not for it's written down, not to show any hegemonic action. So I think that after 2000, the United States has also decided to change and to bring this instability to the system again. Why? Because globalization was not doing well. It's not providing the US of the benefits they were expecting. So let's change rules. Let's deglobalize. And one of the main instruments of deglobalization is access to the dollar, the weaponization of the dollar bomb, as we try to say. So I think we have to have in mind also that the hegemony does not only provide stability, it also imposes some instability and change the rules whenever those rules, the ancient rules, are not as interesting for its power. The third thing I would like to bring about is, what does the internationalization of the one has to do with that? And well, I think the internationalization of the one as is a process that started in 2008 with the crisis. The Chinese were very much affected by the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy and things like that. Their network of trade and financial external links were hardly impacted their economy. So they found out that they could, if they use it more, that currency, if they open it a little bit the financial Chinese wall, put some holes on that would use the usage of the yuan would give more resilience for the Chinese relations, financial and commercial relations with the other countries and other corporations. And this will be a defensive move that will enhance and give more stability to their country. They started that. And one of the interesting things to follow up is they would start to build market for the yuan overseas. The first one in Hong Kong, the second one, big one in London, some years later. I part on a project to start to see if Brazil could follow the Chinese steps and opened this, internationalized the real after that as well. And what I found out is that, well, Brazil's central bank was not at all wanted to internationalize the real, but the Chinese wanted to give more liquidity for the contracts, financial contracts, and the commercial contracts they had, and started to create two currencies. The yuan domestic has an exchange rate, and the international yuan has another rate. And this is what, because they are in terms of capital movements, China is much more backwards than Brazil in terms of internationalization. We can send money for Brazilian if he, well, pay taxes, he can send money overseas easily. The Chinese can't. After more than $50,000 each one, they have to ask permission for the central bank. There are a lot of controls, much more than what we have in Brazil nowadays. On the other hand, they wanted to start that, yuan markets in overseas. They are trying to build one in Brazil to make it easier for the corporations to use their currency. But 2016, they had a problem. Now, Houston, we have a problem, and they did what Deng Xiaoping told them to do: 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And cost them $500 billion of their reserves to adjust the market. It was the overseas yuan was very much speculative. So it had to change the positions. There were a lot of problems in Hong Kong. And since 2016, they keep it more low profile. And it's still moving, but much more low profile. Then what happened in that is that I think that, the yuan is used as exchange rate operations, just 4%. The US dollar is 87%. Okay, so it's not very despite all the progress on internationalization, it's still the yuan is, well, it's larger, getting larger. But what increased the usage of the yuan in the last few years was Russia. Russia started moving their reserves into yuan before the war as a defensive move. And the Chinese said, okay, come in and we will absorb your reserves and we'll give liquidity to the reserves. After the sanctions, in a certain way, the Russian started to depend much more on Chinese yuan to get as a way to keep their economy alive, and again, the funds from sales of oil, gas, and things like that to keep the economy moving. Since in a certain way, the main driver behind that is the US. The US is destabilizing Russia. And the answer is increasing the usage of the yuan. But this is not an active role, from my perspective. This was an opportunity for the Chinese. And Chinese, they have a rivalry with the US. No doubt about that. But there is no such an active process to try to open the Chinese financial wall and things like that. No. They are very much, from my perspective, they know very well what happened to Japan in 1989. Financial finance was very important on the Japanese boom and bust. If they open the economy, I think they have very high levels of leverage. Japanese banks were 5 out of the 10 largest since 1989. So I'm not very, let's say, upset about the huge balance sheets of the Chinese banks. But on a sense that I think that it is an episode, but it doesn't move much further the process of internationalization from a perspective that it is still a defensive, it has a defensive goal on the Chinese mind. I think I'll stay here. I don't know if I took too long, sorry for that. But thank you for the opportunity. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, we
Thank you
have
so
a
much.
5 minutes bonus. Yeah, we have a 5-minute bonus afterwards.
I was going to say, I don't know if there are questions. I would recommend if people could raise their hands, or if not, just open their mics. I would just ask if Gary would like to make a rejoinder and comment briefly about decoupling. And then I see that Giorgio has his hand up. I wonder, Giorgio, could you pose your question now? And they probably answered in a row.
Well, there was Gabriel Porto before me who raised his hand.
No, that was me. That was me already.
Oh, sorry. Okay. No, well, thank you very much. Sorry, I will open my camera. Sorry. In fact, the idea of the dollar being weakened by the yuan has become very sexy everywhere in the world. I think that everyone discusses. But so first, I totally agree with Ernani that I have a strong doubt when Gary spoke about post-hegemonic. I think the US is looking for a new way to organize its hegemony. Because the past one of the last 20, 30, 40 years isn't working anymore. So that's one thing. And the other, when Ernani speaks about defensive strategy of the Chinese, that's a strong argument. But what I see over the last 2 years, 3 years, maybe last year, that the Chinese themselves, they're very much engaged in promoting this idea of a strong one that is challenging the dollar. So when they really very much embraced when Lula goes to China and says that he wants to have trade between Brazil and China without the dollar, and the BRICS without the dollar, and this is very much promoted by Chinese media, and I think this is very offensive to me. I don't understand exactly what's behind it, because I totally agree with Ernani that the capital control system does not allow for a really offensive strategy to really threaten, supplement the dollar. But something is going on. I think the story of defensive strategy was very convincing until a couple of years ago. I think something is moving. Then another thing is, neither Gary nor Ernani spoke about the oil trade, where dollar is, of course, very much linked to the power of the dollar. And there was a lot of talking again. India, it's not only Russia, Saudi Arabia, India, talking about oil buying and selling not in dollar anymore. It's not very clear if this really is just propaganda, or it's really because Saudi Arabia has several times argued that it would step out of the dollar, but it's a crucial issue for the position of the dollar in my view. And then the last thing on this issue, I would very much like to hear you both on this issue of this Brazil-China, renminbi relation, and the clearinghouses in Brazil, and it's of course very small compared to what Hong Kong and London. It's not something new, but the issue is that I was interviewed by a Chinese journalist, and she very much wanted me to say that this is a turning point and everything. And I thought, no, it's because the decision is not by government. It's not Xi Jinping or Lula who decides what traders will do with their dollars or renminbis. So it's private decisions. And my feeling is that, you know, it opens a small new opportunity for some exporters to use their dollars or renminbis, whatever they want. But I'm very much convinced that the large majority of the exporters will stay in dollar. And this is my question. This is, of course, very different in countries like Argentina, because they don't have enough dollars. So there the swaps and the renminbi really gets a completely different story than in the case of Brazil, which is a creditor in dollar, which has surplus with China. So sorry, it's so fascinating issue. I will stop here. But thank you very much, Gary and Ernani and the organizers. This is a very useful debate.
Thank you, Giorgio. I'd like to ask Ernani and Gary, because Luis Fernando also has his hand up, and we have a question in chat. Would you like to take these questions once and for all, or would you like us to parcel them into little bits? Should we take all the questions?
Gabriel, my question is related to George.
Okay, perfect. Could you please state your name and your affiliation? I forgot to mention this. That helps.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Very interesting, and also for the initiative to have this connection between Federal University and the LUBS. Well, my question is related to Giorgio, that about the internationalization of the Chinese currency. That I understand that they have the Chinese government has a very gradual approach, an experimental approach of the internationalization, and there is a important missing point. That is the fact that although China is the second economy of the world, is becoming the first one, China is still an emergent economy in terms of per capita income. So this is important because China is still needs to have the control of the macroeconomic policy. The control still have to the maintenance of capital controls, for instance, as Ernani mentioned. And I don't think that they will abandon, they will do a more radical approach in terms of financial liberalization. That is essential to internationalize the currency. So I think that one point you have this more very experimental in Hong Kong approach that is very typical of the Chinese government. But on the other hand, you have this new fact that United States squeeze financial assets of Russia. That is very different to squeeze of the Iran, squeeze of North Korea. But when you squeeze the financial assets of a big emergent economies, this is very, very dangerous. Imagine that the Turkey government can think that the same can happen with me now. So the result of this is increasing a lot of this sort of bilateral arrangement, monetary arrangement between countries with China, South Arabia, Russia, Brazil as well, and so on. So that there is, I don't have a question actually, but I would like to hear these different points of and what will happen in terms of the hegemony of the US dollar as the fact that China has a strategy of long-term internationalization, and also China is also becoming the first economy of the world. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Luis. I'll add just one question that's on the chat. So I'll read out. It is directed to Ernani, and it approaches the dollar bomb. So first of all, Ernani, if you could say a little bit more about this concept, but Letícia Inácio, and I believe she's from UFRJ, asked two questions. The first one being, what are your considerations about the change in the currency of acceptance in countries that are economically restricted by US power, specifically the ones from Latin America? And the second question relates to the economics of public sector, because when we think of money as a creature of the state, we think about the freedom, between quotes, that countries may have internally. But we always keep stuck in the discussion of the reactions of financial markets and the increase of dollar taxes. Is there a way to overcome this? It's a longer question. So there are many topics involved in this. I'd like to pass the word first to Gary as he started the discussion to see if there's any considerations, and then we go back to Ernani and we keep on from there. Again, thank you everyone so much for your questions.
Gary, you're muted. Now,
Thank you.
Now you're
Sorry
right.
for that. Now I'm good. Okay, let me react to something that was brought up by one of my great students at Leeds in the chat. And I was thinking of this too. Actually, Ernani made this excellent point about the restrictions that are being placed. Iran is one, of course, and then and now we have Turkey is on the bubble there. What about Russia? And actually, if I could just mention that these restrictions, Ernani made the excellent point that the hegemon, that role, you have to be, it's your currency. We'll do whatever it takes, as he put it, to take precautions to operate the assets. Now, once you go in the direction of weaponizing the dollar, in that nice phrase that is used, then of course you're forcing people to play sides, and we're getting into the role of let's say a nationalist agenda that overwhelms or overtakes, and I use the terminology a geopolitical agenda, etc. So that's something that really stands against the continued strength of the U.S. dollar, just because now you've got to pick sides. And as Ernani said, this is not because the U.S. Not doing this, not because it's benevolent, but because it's to the advantage of the dominant U.S. banks and the shadow banks that surround them and often even have many offices in other countries, to be able to move freely to make profits where they can. That said, that's something that has been jeopardized in a variety of ways. Even let's look at the swaps market and the way that we know which countries were given access to dollar swaps in the 2008 crisis. There was a list. Brazil made the list, Argentina did not. And so, these things all count. Now, there's where, in terms of Giorgio's interesting observation, that the United States is reorganizing its hegemony. Interesting way of thinking about it. This maybe is, we don't want to get hung up on what is hegemony in a certain way. Let's have a useful definition, but such an interesting observation. When we see this, like for example, when we saw the US deciding which countries get dollar swaps access and which ones don't, when we see the United States refusing to basically to give in to its financial lobbies and to make the WTO, the World Trade Organization, a more fair and equal playing field. When we see these things, and we see the US, now we're talking about core Rus, Korea, US, US, Colombia, these bilateral agreements, of course, following on with NAFTA, are we seeing a reorganized hegemony that's already anticipating a decoupled world in which the hegemony is only going to extend to some parts of the world? Is that a way of thinking about it? Is quite interesting. And now, on the Brazil-China trade and this possibility, so new topic here, that the possibility of going around the dollar. One thing that strikes me, actually, I've got some some data in these slides I use sometimes for my module here. And when we look at the trade balances in East Asia, you know, in that great, super important trade bloc that's emerged in a sense, as Samir Amin might say, the center of global capitalism. What we see there is that China is in deficit to most of those countries, Korea, Japan, and so on. So there's this complex interaction, and currency movements one way or the other inside that block, of course, have winners and losers. So, and insofar as we see global supply chains extended and more complex, of course, they pulled back a little bit with the crisis, but this is a big part of it. Then, you know, is it possible to think of Brazil, you know, and China, you know, the real and the renminbi, the yuan, in a clear way that can avoid the other kinds of risks that are going to come in? If there were just those two currencies, would you need to have a whole set of options or, you know, derivatives markets that would take into account the possibilities of currency transactions, or rather foreign transactions being more costly or less costly for the buyers and sellers involved, so that what you want to do would be to you know, set up a whole set of markets so that people could hedge, or of course on the other side take risks. This is part of what Ernani was talking about, is that this market could serve you all. That market's been so big that you can hedge as you wish. In a world with lots of instability, that's been a big advantage. So could you really break away from that? I wanted to mention here, actually, Bianca, together with our colleague Nina Kaltenbrenner, has done some interesting work with the Brazilian Central Bank on the question of breaking out of the dependence on the dollar by looking at currency swap, currency possibilities in Mercosur. So I want to throw that out to Bianca to get her involved a little bit in the conversation. And just finally, Luis, Fernando, not surprisingly, we're on the same page. The Chinese have to keep control of their macroeconomy, their macro policy. They've got, as I've mentioned, one of my themes, you know, what they're primarily serving and being aware of is the expectations of the Chinese people. And the marketization, all that is part of retaining the balance between a plan and market in ways that, for example, Dantas has talked about along with Elias in their paper in the Brazilian Journal of Political Economy. You know, they've got to maintain control. And if you allow foreign investors the opportunity to trade your currency and play games with your currency and to invest in a way that can be reckless, it's going to undercut your ability to control. And that's been fundamental for a nation that is still very much in its developmental phase, even while it's become such a giant on the world stage. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Gary. I'd like to pass the floor to Ernani, and then if we have time, we'll make a short round of questions.
Okay. Well, thank you for questions. I would like to start with one point that Giorgio did. There's something moving. I do agree with you, Giorgio, and I think nowadays everyone is moving in the international arena at the same time. And why? Well, because I think we are in the end of an era that started in 1994. The idea of globalization in 1994 was comprehensive. I mean, everyone entered. China with its Communist Party, Latin America with external debt, Russia with the drunken Boris Yeltsin, everyone entered. It was, let's say, a very successful system that lasts for 20 years, or more than 20 years. I think in 2008, a lot of there was a lot of discussions, not only the financial crisis, but also there is a speech of the Russian in Munich, saying that, oh, NATO is too much, we have to change it. The idea of globalization, the way it is, doesn't fit well to Russia. The Chinese, there is a very interesting speech, I guess, from the central bank saying, oh, we have to build a new architecture. We are not very satisfied as well. And the US as well was not satisfied with the globalization. So I think what we're seeing now is that the decoupling is already there. You know, if you were part of the board of an international company, would you invest in China? It's 10 years ago, maybe that question wasn't very important. Nowadays, it is. Deglobalization is already in a process through expectations, through investment decisions, through, you know, taking or coming to China, getting out, and things like that. So when rivalry becomes so widespread, everyone starts to move. Why? Because it opens the space for emerging markets to try to get more benefits from the partners. So let's make pay the oil, Saudi oil with yuan. Oh, it's going to piss off the Americans a little bit, and we can. And well, Brazil and China has, you know, we are the main supplier of soya, of course, and we can. But the game changes. I mean, the rules are not the same anymore. We try to get advantages whenever we want. The point is, how far will decoupling go? When you look to the sanctions, what we call the dollar bomb, the use of the dollar as a bomb, they did it in Iran, and the impact on the economy was enormous in terms of GDP decreasing, inflation. When they took the central bank of Iran out of the SWIFT, out of the global market, the impact was enormous. Just to give you an idea, if you compare the impact on Iranian economy as what happened in Germany and Japan in the Second World War, with all bombing that happened after, the GDP only decreased in 1944. After 5, it took a lot of war to get it, a lot of bombs, a lot of blood, a lot of everything. Now, the dollar bomb is wonderful because there is no American blood involved. It's easy, it's soft, and has a huge impact in economies. But it's not the same bomb. It's a different bomb for each country. So if we are going to decouple, take Russia out, how are you going to provide 10 million barrels a day? Who's going to provide that? So you can't do with Russia the same as you did with Iran. You cannot pull off. They had to continue producing and sell it to India, sell it to China. But the market has there is no supply for 10 million barrels a day. As well as China, how can you cut from, fast the linkage between the global economy, the American economy, and China? It's going to take years, but I think it's irreversible. This is already moving. Everyone is moving, as you said, but it's irreversible. I think the Americans are not satisfied with the global system anymore. They want new rules, and it's going to take time for these rules to come up. We are trying. as you know, as like in the 1970s. What were the rules of the markets? The markets was just, you know, trying to bring, and it took a long time. It took more than 15 years for the financial markets to start again operating and be functional. I think we're going to watch a little bit of dysfunctionality in terms of the world. In that way, it changes the internationalization of the one, but not much. It gives that opportunities. When you open a small hole in the Chinese financial Great Wall, and you just plug a Chinese bank in a local market, let's say Brazil, you get BOCOM, which is Bank of Communications. Bank of Communications organize a yuan market in Brazil and give it some liquidity. It can link the Brazilian yuan market with the market in Beijing, but it's controlled, okay? For example, Brazil did not allow Banco Central, a Brazilian bank, to do that in London. That will make, you know, they could issue derivatives and provide reais. They can do that. If they did it in Brazil, if Brazil allow it for deliverable derivative contracts in reais, liquidity of the market of reais would move from São Paulo to London, and that central bank doesn't want. The Chinese doesn't matter much because the holes are very small. It opens possibility of arbitrage. It opens possibility of contracts. But from my point of view, not much. As you said, why am I going to end the day with, you know, a balance in yuan? What for? I like dollars. When the Argentine government last time ran out of money, they get all the yuans they could from their swap with People's Republic, the Bank of China, and, you know, stole them in London for dollars. So the real user, the capability of using yuan is going to increase, but on a very low level, and it's not going to change much what we have. No? So I think the world's changing, but the process we are talking about, I mean, the internationalization of the one, what we still see is a reaction to what the US is doing. The US is the main driver of the changes that are going in the markets, from my point of view. They are, I'm not sure they know where they are going to, but they didn't know where they were going to in 1971 when they closed the gold window in Washington. It's their system, they know, and we need it. So I think there's a lot of change going on, but not something that really will challenge a lot. Let's say it is a real challenge to the American power and to the role of the dollar in the international market. I think I'll stay here, and maybe we can bring more questions into the...
Perfect. Thank you, Ernani. I would suggest that we do a very quick round of questions and answers because we're almost out of time. And if everybody could spend, I don't know, about 10 minutes, I think we can close this up very nicely. And honestly, it's been an incredible discussion. We could probably stay here. I at least could probably stay here all afternoon at least. First, Danilo, could you state your name and affiliation, please, and your quick question?
All right, thank you, Gabriel. I'm from the Federal University of Rio, and I just would like to make some points that already been said here. That first of all, the political and the economic perspectives are integrated and they are dialectic. So as Ernani said, the economic power of the dollar being used to the power of the United States. And one thing that I would like to bring is that China has this kind of gradual approach. I mean, just like Ben said, you need to cross the river filling stone by stone. So it's normal to see China moving slowly. And that's why I don't think, as people over here said already, that China is looking for open up its financial sector, at least not in the short term. So it looks like to me that they are trying to make the yuan more international, slowly by, you know, trying to make via trade. I mean, with the Saudis and the oil question, with the Eurasian Economic Union, with the help of the Russians, and with the Belt and Road Initiative. So I think it's much more gradual and via trade than financial perspective. And one of the things I would like to ask is how these new digital currencies could change this perspective. You know, when the US use the sanctions, they are using because we are not already has this kind of digital currencies. So how these digital currencies could change the implementation of the sanctions, and you know, this could influence this process of changing the dollar centrality in the international currency market. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Danilo. I'd like to take this segue because you mentioned digital currencies. I don't know if Bianca would like to add some comments to the discussion, because she's been researching this topic recently. Also, I have two questions on the chat for completeness purpose. I also like to approach. The first one from Chisuri. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing the name wrongly. I believe from Leeds. That as given the recent situation faced by the U.S. economy, including, for example, the recent bank failures, as well as the growing role of larger emerging markets as international lenders, especially to much poorer countries, will developments like this have an impact on the dollar hegemony? Not immediately, but possibly erode this power gradually. Also, I think it meshes well with Danilo's question. And lastly, on the chat by Louis, he asked if China seems willing to transition away from financial repression, its control over its current account, or even become a net importer. And according to him, every substantive policy moved by China seems to signal maintenance of high investment, low consumption economy. I think Giorgio would like to echo some comments, but I suggest see if Bianca has any comments you would like to add. Giorgio, if you'd like to add very quickly, and then we will go again to Gary and Ernani to conclude this brilliant session.
I'm just gonna, briefly just make two comments. One was raised by Gary when he was talking about the use of local currencies at the international level. So Nina, Barbara Fritz, and Larissa Mühlich, and I from the University of Berlin, we were working on this topic on what we call the SML, the payment system in local currency, which is used in the Mercosur. So the objective of this system was not, at least according to the central banks, was not to promote the internationalization of the local currency, because they believe that this system is very limited. One of the main reasons being that the Argentinians, for example, they don't want to hold local currency, so they always prefer to hold the dollar. This is not the case of Brazil. Brazil does not have a dollarized economy, but it is the case of other partners in Mercosur. So even though the transactions between companies, the exporters and importers in both countries using this system, they only see the local currency, the central bank kind of transfers the net amount exports minus imports to each other. And of course, that's in dollars. So in a way, you reduce the dependency on the dollar, but that's not completely, gone. And, the other question from Danilo, just some inputs, probably Gary and Ernani want to talk a little bit about that as well. Nina and Sophia and I have written recently a paper about the CBDC and whether CBDC, central bank digital currencies, pose a threat to the US dollar. And our conclusion, it's not really, because, the current system, the way it is ruled by the SWIFT system. And Ernani actually has a very interesting paper about the dollar bomb, where he talks about the importance of the SWIFT and how much power the United States has over the SWIFT. Who are the players? Who are the countries that are allowed to operate in this country? So there is the issue with Iran back in the 2013, 2015, and more recently with Russia. So the whole point here is that the idea of the CBDC, in a way, depending on how countries decide to make international transactions using CBDC, could initially potentially decentralize the power in a way that, okay, we no longer depend on the US, we no longer depend on the SWIFT. However, you would need an active kind of policy to avoid this centralization of any kind of transaction system on the US dollar, because it is a little bit curious to see that the US is kind of like lagging behind when it comes to studies on CBDC. I think right now they started to, write a little bit about that, but for a very long time they were just silent. And on the other hand, it's not surprising that China was kind of like pushing and, putting the CBDC into a testing phase and so on. So the way we understand it, how it works is that CBDC alone is not going to threat or cause any threat to the powerful position of the US dollar. You would need an active policy behind it to avoid having a CBDC system that is very much similar to the US dollar system that we have nowadays.
That was excellent. Nice to see the conversation. Thank you, Bianca. Giorgio, could you please
very quickly? Yeah, so just on the issue of delinking, what we see is the selective delinking, state-led. The US government, European government, they are pressing for selective delinking. The companies are not following. The FDI to China is increasing, because in the past, what was good for General Motors was good for the US and the other way around. Now it's not anymore. What's good for General Motors is to stay in China. There's a huge market, dynamic market. There is where the electrification goes on. So you see Intel, Tesla, Volkswagen, BASF, you name it. They're increasing their presence in China, not decreasing. There's an attempt of the Biden government and the European Union to convince these companies by subsidies, by pressure, but so far, and the Chinese are stimulating this, because in the past it was car companies, for example, could only have 25%, and Tesla has already 100%, and then now they're giving to other companies 50%. So they're stimulating this process of a tension between what private international companies are doing, they want to be in China, and what the governments are doing, they want them to get out of China. And that's one of the main dynamics in the coming years, I feel. And exactly the fact that these companies want to be in China and increase their presence in China for the Chinese market, the Chinese technology, is also an obstacle in effect, the impact on the dollar is not so clear to me, but they will operate in dollars. So that's okay, sorry.
Perfect, thank you, Giorgio. Very nice considerations as well. Gary, any final thoughts, any final echoes to the questions and comments so far?
Thanks. Yeah, I've got three quick responses. First, Giorgio. Yeah, that's true that I didn't have a chance to talk about the decoupling and all of that. But we're, as Ernani said very picturesquely, everything in the global economy now is shaking, and that includes, interestingly, right, the G7 meeting in Japan, and Korea and Japan being asked to choose who are they going to collaborate with. Taiwan as well. Are we going to see new standards and new efforts, and that at the technological level, that tension between what the states want in the companies, your point's well taken. Although I would point out that we've seen before, going back to my visit to China in 2004, when Motorola and other Western Nokia phone companies were there with manufacturing sites in coastal zones in China, with the promise that they could enter Chinese markets. Soon, however, to be basically left behind after the technology transfer, it was Chinese companies that were selling most phones to China. Of course, the exception, Apple, very complicated. So that's a complicated question. Keep in mind there that when we say state, we say the Chinese state, we mean the special role of the Chinese Communist Party trying to keep control of everything. Very interesting moment for them. Secondly, on the student that whose name I know as Roji from Leeds. Recent bank failures in the US, I just would say that the Silicon Valley Bank and the First Republic Bank failures and takeovers illustrate the point I was making about the weakened state of US economy and institutions in the wake of the great financial crisis. What we see there is that there is this effort by the central banks to use their inflation fighting monetary policy. But of course, what that does by driving up interest rates, they put the market value of many of the securities held by banks in upside down. So there's lots of actually undeclared capital losses. Again, financial vultures step in. And so you have kind of, on the one hand, right now, the monetary policy fighting inflation. Secondly, the central banks doing that. Secondly, the central banks needing to regulate banks to be safe and sound. And at the same time, the central banks are being asked to provide safety and security to depositors in their banks that they regulate, including the right to withdraw their money with no loss of principal. This sounds like, to me, this feels like a new impossibility problem, a trilemma or something. They can't do it all. You can't ride 3 horses at the same time. Finally, on digital currency, interesting, we have to remember that the central banks that would issue this, while it is partly a way out of a problem of going through other currencies and so on, we have to remember too that the central banks are themselves part of a nexus of with market players and the large banks on whom they depend and the broker dealers and so on. And actually, there was an article published just yesterday in the Financial Times that basically said, just to read the title, is the question, is the answer, the digital euro, a solution seeking a problem. And it goes on to basically say, we've got lots of ways to do things. We don't need a digital euro. So basically, it's not something that's a magical solution to get out of the market versus banks versus central banks versus speculative markets problem. It's another solution that actually is positioned in a complicated way amongst those different players. Okay, I'll leave it there, and thank you for the great opportunity.
Thank you so much, Gary. Ernani, did you like to wrap up?
Okay, just 2 quick comments. One on the issue of China. I don't think we should expect to see the impact of deglobalization very clear in a very short time. No one wants the Chinese economy to come down. No, Janet Yellen said that, Jake Sullivan said that, and I think they're quite, they're speaking the truth that, China is a very important economy and the growth of Chinese economy is important for the global economy. So I am not surprised that FDI is increasing in China. The Chinese market is enormous, it's as large as the American, and it's growing fast. So to be in China, to build electric vehicles in China is very important. What you see is a linkage coming from more sensitive or more politically sensitive industries, or the idea of nearshoring, friendshoring. This is what's coming and we can see that the companies that are related in this area, particularly in semiconductors, are already being, where you're not going to China and say like that. I think this will be, it will increase. Financial sanctions is something you increase slowly, but steady. You have to increase and say it. So, but the impact takes a little bit of time to come. So I don't think we should expect to see in the nowadays figures. The process already it is particularly global figures that decoupling is not going on. From my opinion, it is. The second thing is about I'll say digital currencies. I think Bianca explained very well what's going on, and I just want to add that I was very fascinated when this issue came up in the beginning. The idea of having an account at the central bank would be really a revolution. But I think this idea, which we could have a CDB that we all could have an account at the central bank as well. This will change a lot of things, particularly, for example, in Brazil, where a large part of the population doesn't have an account. I can't pay, for example, some of the maid I have in my home in Brazil because she doesn't have an account. I have to pay her cash. So this could change a lot, and CDB could be a large impact. But politically, I don't think it will come this way. Now, CDBs are gonna be issued by banks. They will take the lead of stable coins. Stable coins is going to be the money of the future. The technology, unfortunately, is not going well in terms of the impact on capital markets. It's a lot of of money coming that you make in the payment system in the capital markets. How to say that? The central counterpart makes a lot of money to take risk. How you provide that? So the technology, as well as the stablecoin, could bring it down. But it seems that, for example, the experience of in Sydney didn't work well. So there is a problem in terms of that. But it will come. I think the US is not behind the curve. It's just that they know they will take the lead. It will come. Their banks are going to issue the stable coins and not the treasury. The same thing is going to happen in Brazil. So don't expect much, and as well, don't expect much from Chinese CBDC changing the game. As Bianca said, it's not going to come that way. I think those are the comments I want to make, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today.
Well, no, we are the ones that need to thank you and Gary for the insightful conversation, and I would like to share with you just the website advertising the next 2 panels and 2 seminars that we'll hold. The first one, the next 2 weeks from now, on Friday, 2 of June. And then the third seminar, we'll have more room to discuss the things about CBDCs and currency internationalization with Bianca and Rodrigo Verdaini in the 7th of July. And so the video of today will be available here at this web page, and you can also find more information on this. And thanks everyone for joining us and for engaging with us on this conversation. I hope it was a really nice morning here in Brazil, and I hope you also had this impression in the UK. Bianca, final word?
I just wanted to thank the participants once again, and of course the people who showed up for the interest in our topic, in helping us to build this bridge between LUBS and the Federal University of Rio. So thank you very much, and I really hope to see you in our next seminars. I think the discussion as well as the presentations were really, really rich to a very high standard, if I may say. So thank you so much.
Well, that's it. So thank you, Gabriel. And I'd like to advance a thank you for Guilherme and Camila. Camila is the one that prepared all the design and arts, and Guilherme will be the one that will be editing this video. So I'll just leave it here for them to see. And thank you, everyone. Have a lovely weekend. See you in the next session. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. Take care.